build cities. We need them, but we have to make them in a different way.
We need a wave of innovation, not only for our way of life, but also for the planet.
The consequences would be enormous if we lose this battle.
I'm Thomas Getz, Executive Editor at Wired Magazine. At Wired, we look at the innovators and innovations that are changing our world. In the next hour, we'll see 3 stories from acclaimed filmmakers about the future of energy. We'll explore cutting-edge innovations in how we drive, how we live, and in our first story, how we fuel our cars. They are all ideas that promise to shape the path to the world of 2050.
The world has right now close to 1 billion cars, and we might double the number of cars on the planet by 2050. So if we double the number of vehicles, we really increase the amount of fuel they consume, and that's going to have a big footprint in terms of our demand for resources to move all those vehicles around.
We're pulling up carbon that's been stored underground and burning it in our automobiles and putting all that carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. If we don't reduce that, we could have changes in the climate that we could never recover from.
There's a number of forecasts for what type of transportation economy we could move into. One vision is that we will use more and more liquid fuels. Another one is we'll use more and more electricity. And right now, more of the industrial activity is focused around liquid biofuels.
The thing about a fuel is it's really unparalleled on a weight basis how much energy is in a gallon of fuel. And even if batteries develop as some of the advocates hope they develop, we're not going to see batteries running large trucks, and we're certainly not going to see an electrified air fleet. We're going to need transportation fuels for those that will directly replace the petroleum-based fuels that we're using today.
This has kicked off people looking at a whole range of other alternatives to petroleum in your tank.
Commercial production of ethanol as fuel started in Brazil in 1975. When we started the ethanol program, nobody talked about reducing emissions. This was not an issue at that time. First, and most important, we didn't have money to buy oil anymore after the first oil shock. We were importers of oil. And today, more than 50% of all cars use ethanol instead of gasoline.
Brazil made a very conscious choice to try to find a way to reduce their fossil fuel dependence. And they didn't have to look very far because Brazil's climate is ideal for growing sugarcane.
When you have sugarcane plantation, you have only 2 things to make: sugar and ethanol. My family has been in sugarcane business since 1955. And about 30 years ago, I thought there is opportunity to make more ethanol. And now we are producing 120,000 cubic meters of ethanol.
Brazil today has very close to 400 sugar mills. The overall sales is $30 billion US dollars, and this number is increasing.
If you look at how they make ethanol and how efficient the process is, it's really a model for all of us. They grind the plant up, extract the sugar from the cane. The sugar goes into these large fermentation tanks, which combines sugars together with yeast that naturally produces ethanol. They use the rest of the plant to generate heat to distill the ethanol and turn it into fuel. They also use that heat to generate electricity renewably, not putting excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Brazil has gotten to a point today where they're using about 40% less petroleum than they would be otherwise. But Brazil cannot supply the whole world with ethanol. because they would have to cut very strongly into food production and into critical natural areas like the Amazon to make that happen. And this really boils down to the fact that there's only so much arable land, and growing fuel for our gas tanks is yet another demand on that landscape.
We cannot kid ourselves in thinking that we found a general solution for the world problems. I think we will have to face the world in this way today. We have no oil in very large quantities anymore. We have no coal transformed in a clean way. In the meantime, we have to do the best we can. And the best at the moment is that we can do biofuels.
Sugarcane to ethanol is an incredibly efficient process. You get out about 7 times the energy you put into growing the sugarcane. In the U.S., when we produce ethanol from corn, for every unit of input of energy, we get about the same amount of energy out. So we're really not gaining anything. We need a better process. We don't have to take what nature's given us. We can actually engineer plants and yeast to be more efficient, and that's the basis for a lot of the work that we're doing now.
What we need to look at, though, is which of the pathways that come out of this are not only good financially, but those that are also good in sustainability. And this equation is really wide open right now.
We are in a race to develop fuels. The race isn't with other countries, the race is against time.
To meet the immediate and future demands, we made the energy solution spring from the ground.
Brazil is the most efficient ethanol-producing country in the world. Sugarcane alcohol from Brazil can reduce the total carbon footprint by up to 70% compared with the gasoline.
The biggest challenge for fuel providers and car manufacturers is to reduce CO2 emissions over the next 20 years.
Demand for mobility will continue to grow. We believe that biofuels are very important because they help in an immediate way. All forms of fuel are going to be needed. Hydrocarbons, natural gas, biofuels, all of them are going to be part of the energy mix for the future of transportation.
Wine and beer. We're trying to do something very similar, only we're engineering the yeast to consume that glucose and turn it into a fuel or a drug or chemical. We call this synthetic biology. And when I started in this area, many of my colleagues said, "Oh, Jay, this is great work, but where's the application? What are you going to do with these tools? Who cares?" Malaria is an enormous problem. In any one year, 1 million or so people die of the disease, and most of them are children under the age of 5. So we thought this was a great opportunity to engineer yeast to produce an anti-malarial drug called artemisinin. This drug is derived from plants right now, but it's too expensive for people in the developing world. So my laboratory engineered yeast to produce small quantities of artemisinin. Now that process is being scaled up and we'll have this drug on the market shortly, but at a substantially reduced cost. It turns out that anti-malarial drug is a hydrocarbon, and it's very similar in many ways to diesel fuel. We thought, gosh, we could turn our attention now to fuels. We could make a few changes in that microbe to turn it into a fuel-producing microbe. If we imagine that glucose is going to be our new petroleum, we need a source for that glucose. And so the crops that we're looking at are crops like switchgrass. This is a native grass that grows without a lot of water and on marginal lands that we could turn into energy farms. The challenge, though, is that unlike sugarcane, it's very difficult to get the sugar out of that biomass. So we use what we call a pretreatment process to extract the glucose from the plant, and then we feed that glucose to a yeast that we've engineered to produce hydrocarbons. And that yeast takes in the sugar and it changes its composition and gives us this high-energy molecule. They float to the top, you skim them off, you put them in your tank. But it takes a lot of work to get from that small test tube all the way up into the million-gallon tank. So we have to give it time, but I think that some of the discoveries that are happening might be applied by the end of the decade.
In terms of a sustainable equation for the planet, the role of biofuels is quite tricky. There are a variety of crops that do not compete directly with food, and finding ways to utilize those types of crops first, that's very attractive. So solving the science is part of the story, but then evaluating all of these new fuels in terms of the land use impacts that they could have, that is an even harder story than doing the good science.
Imagine that you could have one process that could take in sunlight and carbon dioxide and turn it into fuel. And imagine if that didn't involve growing anything at all.
The synthetic biologists are trying to take plants and make them do things that they wouldn't normally do. On the other hand, materials chemists like myself want to do artificial photosynthesis to improve on the process that nature does in real photosynthesis. We should follow the blueprint of plants converting sunlight into fuel, but take the approach that it could be much simpler. All we really need is a light absorber that absorbs sunlight. We also need a catalyst like iron or nickel. So when you see the hydrogen coming off of the photoactive material, that's an example of a semiconductor breaking the chemical bonds of water to make hydrogen and oxygen. Ultimately, our pieces are going to be contained in something that is easy to roll out like bubble wrap, where in would come sunlight and water. You would vent the oxygen to the air, but the bottom would wick out your liquid or gaseous fuel that then you could collect and use for our cars and planes and storage. Our goal is within 2 years to have the first artificial photosynthesis solar fuels generator that we can hold in our hands, and then get to scale beyond that time.
We're certainly not good at predicting the future, but to me, electric vehicles look like a sustainable option. We've heard proposals about things as far-fetched as nuclear-powered planes, and even some proposals to move freight around with lighter-than-air vehicles. And so, if the future in 2050 does include a fair amount of oil, what it means would be that we haven't deployed as many of these clean technologies as we already know are possible.
If you think about how long it's taken for us to build up the petroleum industry, we can't hope to reverse that overnight. It's a huge change in our infrastructure. Yes, we should have been working on it 30 years ago. We didn't. We're trying to make up for that, and that means basic research needs to be done now and by as many people as possible. We have a long way to go, but I'm confident that we'll get there.
In the future, 3D maps are going to help people get places more efficiently.
As we just saw, the race to produce cleaner energy is charging ahead. In the meantime, demand for cars continues to climb. By 2050, it's predicted there'll be 2 billion cars on the planet, and fuel consumption will have tripled. To keep pace, we'll have to radically change the way we drive. Here's our next story, Driven by Design.
The automobile came around. In many ways, it was the future. We thought of it as one of the more positive changes that had happened to society. Suddenly, our ability to get a job changed. We can live farther away with bigger plots of land, with better quality of living. It all looked quite good. But there are limitations to swearing by the car. If it gets congested, your quality of life drops immediately. To spend so long in the car, it's very inefficient use of fuel consumption. Things start making sense all of a sudden. It doesn't bring you closer to where you want to get. It actually sometimes brings you farther.
The average American spends nearly 300 hours a year in their car, 38 of them stuck in traffic. Annually, congestion consumes over $1 billion in gasoline in the United States alone. The inefficiency caused by traffic, both financial and personal, is enormous. Dirk Sheehan and Carmen White's story is not that unusual today.
Dirk works an hour and a half away in Warrenville, Illinois. Generally, he wouldn't leave work until 6 or 6:30, and I would say a usual time for him to get home is around 8.
Usually when I wake up, I'm the only one up. Sometimes the kids wake up with my routine. More often than not, I don't see them in the morning. I think about my commute when I wake up. I check the traffic report, see if there's any delays. The worst case scenario, it takes me 2 hours to get to work.
We are already so limited in the amount of time he can spend with the kids. And our expenses are crazy high. We are spending $400 a month on gas. It takes away from our food budget, and we never paid for gas like that before, ever.
There's technology that would allow me to spend less time in the car, spend less money on gas, and spend more time at home. I'd be all for that.
The cost of traffic is people's time, it's fuel wasted, it's an emotional toll, it's a frustration. Utilizing the roads more intelligently is a much more efficient approach to the inability to have supply keep up with traffic demand.
If you took a satellite picture of the highway, you can see that there's actually a lot of open space. And if we had the technology for cars to drive more closely but safely, then you could increase the utilization of the road network.
What this means is that to be more efficient, to use less fuel, we need to see the road differently. We need cars that can navigate through the urban landscape in a radically different way.
Maps in the future are going to be able to help people get places either more safely or more efficiently. Today, it just helps you get from point A to point B. But what if I want to get someplace and use the least amount of fuel possible? Or if I've got a hybrid vehicle, I want to make sure I've got plenty of charge, not only get there, but to get back home. So information that is going to help people achieve the more efficient or the safer route is more detailed information about the road than a lot of people realize is possible to collect today.
Here in Chicago, Nokia's Location and Commerce Unit is developing the next generation of mapping. LiDAR, sonar, 360-degree video, all are components of what Nokia calls digital mapping.
We use 64 lasers that rotate and they collect data in a 3D way about the world. It creates what we call a point cloud of information. That point cloud allows us to measure distances then between the points that we collect. That system combined with the cameras with higher precision location detection through inertial measurement units, that whole data system allows us to collect 1.3 million points of data per second. Probably within 2 to 3 years, you're going to see 3D maps that are going to integrate the traffic information into your routing to help you understand. If I've got 5 different routes to take, which one is the most efficient today, given the way the stoplights are running, given the way traffic is running? All of those factors are going to be taken into consideration to make sure I've got the best route.
But better mapping that can integrate topography, infrastructure, and density is only part of the answer. Another key to improving transport efficiency is building cars that drive themselves.
Autonomous vehicle technology has a tremendous potential to improve efficiency of our road infrastructure.
By removing humans from the equation, we eliminate all the things we do wrong behind the wheel. Speeding, changing lanes too often, merging haphazardly. And by marrying autonomous vehicles with sophisticated 3D maps, we can make driving safer and more energy efficient. That next generation vehicle is being built right now by the Swedish trucking company, Scania.
The solution, as you see it, is that the vehicles can utilize intelligent maps, three-dimensional maps with traffic information. The vehicles will be intelligent and communicate with each other. They will talk to each other, they will talk to the infrastructure. And we will see completely autonomous driven vehicles.
The goal was to have multiple robots and see if they could go 60 miles fully autonomously.
My name's Helen Taylor. My husband John and I were very passionate about fuel economy.
Yeah, it's great to break world records, but that's not the be-all and end-all now. It's more important to educate people.
Together we're showing drivers around the world simple techniques to improve their fuel efficiency.
We run these education programs, get people on the road with us, and we finally tweak their driving techniques. Things like just checking your tyre pressures before you even get into your car. For every 1 PSI your tyres are underinflated, you're wasting 3% of your fuel efficiency. And the difference between 65 and 75 miles per hour, there's a saving of 23%. When you talk to the general public, they're very surprised that an energy company like Shell is trying to educate people how to save money, how to reduce CO2 emissions.
And here we have Shell sending us around the world to do that.
You always hope when you're on this planet that you can make a real difference in people's lives. When you get emails from people saying, I've saved this amount of money this year, now I can put food on the table, then you know you are really making a difference.
By displaying traffic density in the urban infrastructure in a revolutionary way, 3D digital maps will help create a more fuel-efficient future. But these technologies are limited by the drivers who sit behind the wheel. Some believe that for cars and trucks to be truly energy efficient, they will need to drive themselves.
The technology is coming into play through sensors and capabilities for cars to drive autonomously.
In 2007, the United States Department of Defense held a competition to see if a completely autonomous self-driving vehicle was possible.
DARPA stands for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They held a competition to develop self-driving robots that could drive themselves in traffic. The goal was to have multiple robots, turn them loose on a course, and see if they could go 60 miles in 6 hours fully autonomously.
Driving may be one of the most complex things we do every day. Drivers make dozens of decisions at any given moment. One study found that drivers were exposed to over 1,300 items of information per minute.
We make so many decisions when we're driving without even thinking about it. So in creating our vehicle, a great component of the enterprise was developing software to handle lots of sensors, feeding lots of data, and generating a bunch of potential paths that the vehicle might follow. And even though the robot doesn't have the ability to predict the future, by using this fast random path generation, the robot could anticipate a potential accident and choose a path to avoid it, because it's always thinking about what things could the car do next.
No one expects millions of cars driving themselves anytime soon. But there is a place where self-navigating technologies are being optimized to create the vehicle of the future.
We are on the Scania test track outside Stockholm, where we have basically, it looks like a highway, but it's a separate test track where we conduct our own experiments.
Scania, the Swedish trucking company, has recently begun testing its next generation of long-haul truck. Utilizing radar, sonar, and intelligent mapping, they've been able to drastically reduce fuel consumption.
We have this example with platooning, where we make use of the reduction in air resistance or air drag that you get from driving close to each other with heavy-duty vehicles. And in order to control this, you need to know where the other vehicles are, where their position, their velocity, their actions in the near future. And to be very close to the vehicle ahead of you requires that you have very accurate control.
If you look at robotics broadly, there's a wonderful set of research on people looking at schooling of fish and trying to develop the ability for robots to work together like that. So there are wonderful examples from nature of how cooperation can lead to more efficient resource utilization.
You can see it when people are competing in Tour de France. They platoon to reduce air drag. They are not bicycling behind each other that close because it's fun or because they are racing. It is because they are reducing air drag, sitting behind the man who is leading.
A truck traveling 55 miles per hour expends half its energy just to move the air around it. At 65 miles per hour, that number jumps to almost 2/3. Even if platooning can reduce the energy used by 10%, the savings would be substantial.
If a vehicle in front of another vehicle wants to brake, it immediately sends out the brake message to the other vehicles. So they actually brake at the same time.
The way we do this is we have an automated system. So now, for instance, if I take my feet off the acceleration pedal and turn the system on, the velocity is automatically governed by getting information from the vehicle ahead through its wireless system. We want these vehicles to maintain a short relative distance. So through this system, we can reduce the fuel consumption by utilizing the air drag reduction by 10%. And 10% would mean you will be able to save approximately 8,000 euros per single heavy-duty vehicle per year.
It may be some time before autonomous vehicles make up the majority of cars on America's highways. Nevertheless, some of these technologies are already making their way into our lives.
Now, this polar baby wants to sleep. Do you get to pick up books every day, or is it just something
I get to pick out books sometimes.
Okay.
When we look toward the future, the systems will absolutely make it safer and more efficient and less costly for you, and also make your life easier because you're spending less time on the roads.
The city begins to talk, begins to tell you where is there congestion, what's going on in different areas of town. Suddenly, the car becomes a part of a much bigger ecosystem. We can look at how cars interact with other cars, how car interacts with infrastructure, and us, the drivers, can start to make smart decisions about how to move around. Suddenly, mobility becomes a whole other thing.
No matter how much money they have, no matter how much oil they have, everybody has to go in a different direction.
And live in our cities. That's the subject of our next story, Searching for Utopia. We'll travel to the United Arab Emirates and discover a city rising out of the desert. Let's take a look.
From the beginning, we've dreamed of utopia. A place where we could live in harmony with each other and in balance with nature. Many have imagined it, tried to design it. Then I heard they were building a new city called Masdar, near Abu Dhabi, in the Arabian desert. It sounded like an unlikely place for utopia, and I wanted to see it.
The last half century has been a pretty bad time for the making of cities, mostly. The natural tendency has been to accommodate to the automobile more than anything else. Try walking around Abu Dhabi. It's impossible. You have to take a car everywhere. Dubai, the same thing. They are among the least pedestrian-friendly places in the world. They are not green by any other measure either. And these are not easy things to fix.
Masdar is still under construction, and it doesn't look like much from the highway. But they claim it's going to redefine the way cities are designed, built, and powered.
Masdar City in Abu Dhabi will be the city of the future and the role model for the world.
Once you see what they've envisioned for this utopian city, it's very impressive. It's carbon neutral, pedestrian friendly, and powered by renewable energies. But I do notice we're going to have to change our relationship with cars.
Welcome to Masdar City. أهلا بكم في مدينة مصدر.
We are driving in the bowels of Masdar City in an electric transportation system. Slightly unnerving to see this for the first time. Where are we going?
The first big move the architects at Foster & Partners made was to put all transportation underneath the city, leaving the streets of Masdar totally free of cars. The place reminded me of a medieval city, and actually, many design elements are adapted from ancient Arabic towns and villages.
It's all about looking back into history to move forward. There's some very, very simple ideas that have a huge impact. This is the pedestrian zone, there's no cars here. This has enabled us to push our streets together to take the advantage of the shade, channel the cooling breezes through. The whole scale here is based on the human being, it's not based on the motor car. As soon as you lift up the pedestrian plane by 7 meters, you've suddenly captured this breeze. What you can see here in the balconies, we've got a modern interpretation of an ancient Arabic screen. What we must avoid is direct sunlight hitting any piece of glass. As soon as the sun hits the glass, the heat's transferred into the building and we have to use more energy to cool it down.
Can this really make all that much of a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, downtown Abu Dhabi, 60-metre wide streets, black asphalt, mirrored, reflective buildings, no relief from the sun. On a day in September, the air temperature in both places was 39 degrees. In Abu Dhabi, the temperature measured at the asphalt was 57 degrees. In Masdar, the temperature measured on the ground is 33 degrees, so we've actually lowered the air temperature. We're trying to do as much as possible with as little as possible.
These simple design moves cut air conditioning needs by 60%. But this place is also technically very sophisticated. The roof panels not only provide shade, they also generate electricity. And the walls themselves are made of glass-reinforced concrete, literally sand taken from the desert. Everything here is geared towards maximizing energy efficiency.
Masdar does represent a whole different value system. It represents an acknowledgement that eventually everybody has to go in a different kind of direction. No matter how much money they have, no matter how much oil they have, no matter anything else. All of the cities here in this part of the world have come out of nowhere. There was nothing here not so long ago, except small settlements in the desert. And then all of this oil and all of this money, and suddenly, wham, these cities started popping up. But they sprung up in a false love of a Western model that was already out of date. The model of the late 20th century automobile-based, energy-hogging city.
For most of the world, energy is very expensive. But the United Arab Emirates is sitting on 10% of the world's oil. And energy is cheap. So cheap, you can run a ski slope in a shopping mall and build the world's tallest skyscraper. But even here, cheap energy won't last forever. And the people behind Masdar are determined to find alternatives.
For a better city, public transportation, information, energy. We understand demand will rise. We understand that current supplies will struggle to keep pace. So we have to, of course, find ways of bridging the gap between the demand and the supply.
Decisions that we take now are going to have a major impact on decades to come.
There's enough oil under these sands to last 150 years. But fundamental to the Masdar ideal is getting energy from renewable sources, from geothermal and wind, and most of all, from a source they have in abundance in the desert, the sun. This field of solar panels makes more than enough electricity to run Masdar, and the excess power is sent to the Abu Dhabi grid. But silicon panels are expensive, and the price of solar power needs to drop if it's going to be competitive from Africa to Asia to Arizona. In the future, Masdar hopes to get energy from this prototype called the solar beam down. Using highly reflective mirrors, the solar beam down may generate power more cheaply and ecologically than silicon panels. The mirrors bounce the sun's rays up to the tower and then down to a point. Reaching a temperature of 600 degrees, steam can be generated to run turbines to make electricity. There's just one problem. Neither of these solar technologies work at night. So Masdar needs to draw power from the grid when the sun goes down. And that power comes from natural gas. The reality is, it's just not yet possible to power Masdar entirely without fossil fuels.
The great challenge with Masdar will be, how do you make it a place that will not be just this ideal city that no other place could actually aspire to because it doesn't seem real? What Masdar has to be is a laboratory that develops things that then can be applied in existing cities all around the world, because that's where it will pay off. There's no payoff if it's just about itself. The payoff is, how can everything it's trying to do matter in the rest of the world?
Right now, there's only a store, 2 restaurants, a bank, and a few hundred students living here. It's too early to tell if Masdar will work as a city when it's finished. But much has been achieved. They are carbon neutral and largely powered by renewable energies. Solutions here won't work everywhere, though. Many cities are in cold climates, and cooling is not their energy problem. They need to let sunlight in, not keep it out. Cities like Los Angeles or Houston are built around cars. Can Masdar's lessons be applied to them? Still, it's a step in the right direction. And it's impressive that this step is being taken by a country that doesn't need to take it. I met a guy who said actually they did need to take it. He took me to the desert to explain.
God says, وَعَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ. God talks about man's place in the universe. That this world is a trust. And God offered this trust to the mountains, to the heavens, to the land, to earth, and all refused it, refused to take this trust. But man, being adventurous, a bit vain, maybe too ambitious, being man, accepted it. Now, accepting it, there is a responsibility.
Taking responsibility isn't always easy. Utopia may be unattainable, but we must reach for it. And Masdar does give us a clue to what cities will be like in the future. They may not look quite like Masdar, but they will be shaped by the same concerns, by energy, where it comes from, and how it's used.
The way we've been building cities lately is unsustainable. We can't go on building them that way. But to say that we can't build cities the way we have been building them doesn't mean we can't build cities in the future. In fact, we have to build cities. Cities are the essential statement of human civilization. So we will continue to make them. But we have to make them in a different way.
What we've seen is that the world of 2050 won't look drastically different from the world.
New ideas in science. Deepen your connection to nature, to the stars, and to each other. Learn to see the world differently. The connected universe. Do we truly see the universe when we open our eyes? Do we see the vast potential that's inside of us? First came fire, then came steel. And it wasn't long before we started asking some big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Some of the greatest minds in our history, Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, Rumi, Leonardo da Vinci, Michael Faraday, Max Planck, Nikola Tesla, and Albert Einstein all start to explore the big questions of life and our universe. Their collective work points to something very important, that we might be far more interconnected than anyone had ever thought. Their ideas were way ahead of their time, so they left hidden messages for others to find later, because in their day they could only share their knowledge with a few people. We live in an age where we can communicate to every point on the globe. We are all connected. But it's more than just a feeling. It's also a mathematical equation. But the idea that we are all connected sounds like a platitude to many of us. We're more disconnected than ever in certain ways. War, violence, greed, tragedies. These are the stories that fill the news channels, and this is a very disconnected view of the world. Us against them, you against me, danger and disaster lurking around every corner. But are we complicit in it? Because this is what so many people seem compelled to watch, drawn to the worst aspects of humanity. And then there's the ever-increasing pace. Why do we race through life so quickly, taking in disconnected message fragments with no voice, heart, or context? When we consume bite-sized pieces of information, it's very hard to imagine the big picture. Why does our world seem so frantic? Why do we spend so much of our time chasing money, career, intimacy and possessions, with schedules so full when all we really want is simply to be together? For all of our progress, we've lost connection to the one thing that really matters. We remain disconnected while pretending to be connected. And being connected at a distance makes it easier for some people to say hurtful things. We have trouble staying connected to the ones we love, let alone the rest of humanity. There is fear and there is beauty. Which world do we want? How we connect with the world changes our experience of the world. There is hidden mathematics that underlies all of creation. Nassim Haramein believes the world is profoundly connected. Our universe is filled with mystery. Our planets, stars and galaxies account for only 4.9% of the matter of the universe. So what makes up the rest of the universe? Is it dark matter? Is it dark energy? There is a large amount of unexplained energy in our universe. In 1992, the NASA Cosmic Background Explorer detected fluctuations in the background energy of the universe. To explore this mystery, we need to remember the words of Nikola Tesla. If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. There is a flow of the energy of the universe around you and a flow of the energy of the universe inside of you.
When people realize that everything is connected, this sense of separation, this sense that we're isolated, hopefully that goes away. And it's replaced with this feeling that we're part of this incredible creation in which everything is interdependent on everything else. And that everything is connected through this energy that's in the space. And then actually it's the space that creates matter and reality and them. They're part of the whole thing. And so that they can see the incredible potential that they have, the incredible miracle that it is that they're alive and that they're able to experience this interconnectivity with everything. It's a feeling of resonance and a feeling of connection with everything in the natural world. And maybe, just maybe, as a result of understanding this at a deeper level, they will start to understand themselves at a deeper level. And understand the functioning of the universe at a deeper level. And that it will give hope to people.
Could there be a scientific basis to the way we are all connected? Albert Einstein changed the world with one equation. Yet he knew that his greatest work, to create a single unified theory of the universe, was never finished. Einstein knew how important it would be to humanity if this could be discovered, and he kept searching for answers. But before he could solve it, he ran out of time. Others have built on the work of Albert Einstein in the search for a unified theory of everything. Some people have a knowingness of this connection between the macro and the micro. In the past, we've created mythology around it. But what if we could understand it through the lens of science? Nassim Haramein has been exploring how everything is contained in everything else. The exploration of the universe through mathematics and physics has been complex. Yet from this complexity emerges simplicity. What if there is a way of proving that everything is connected and one at the same time? To understand this, we must take a journey, and our journey begins with the proton. If you remember back to your high school science class, atoms are everywhere, and the protons are at the center of every atom. Therefore, we must accurately understand the proton if we're going to understand the universe. New measurements of the proton suggest we must change our existing way of thinking. Nassim Haramein was the first person to have accurately predicted the new measurement of the charge radius of the proton. The proton could hold the key to a scientific understanding of how the connection of the universe actually works. 1905. Einstein demonstrated through an example of a person traveling on a train the theory of relativity. He unified the separate camps of energy and mass with his famous formula. But later, a great divide in physics occurred when Niels Bohr and a group of physicists split off to explore quantum mechanics. They saw two worlds, a quantum world that describes the probabilities and the uncertainties of the very small, and the separate mathematics for the larger universe. Creating this division led to a very disconnected way of thinking. Nassim Haramein, the Director of Research for the Resonance Science Foundation, has been on a lifelong search to discover a unified theory of everything.
My passion for learning never subsided. As soon as I left school, I got more passionate than ever about understanding the universe, studying physics and mathematics and so on, to try to describe it better and eventually to write a unified view of physics. To me, it was critical that we understood the source of reality. We come here and we experience this life, and most people don't ask, like, how did I get here? What is this life? How am I moving billions and trillions of atoms around? I was exploring all this for my own personal satisfaction. It really wasn't to get a master's degrees or a PhD in some institution. I knew that if I went to the institution, I felt I was going to be restricted. I knew I was going to be given very specific concepts that I would have to go with. I didn't want that. I wanted to be completely free to think what I wanted to think as I explored. It led me down a very specific road. Certainly some of the things I thought turned out to be wrong, but eventually I started to home in on the stuff that worked together, and I found something, I think, very fundamental and very profound.
To understand how everything is unified, Nassim had to study nature. He had to look at patterns. He looked at the macro and the micro. He started asking questions about some of the fundamental principles science has taken for granted, and started to wonder if, somewhere, we went off on the wrong track. As he continued his journey, he began to understand that in order to see how everything is connected, we had to look at everything.
Everything we experience as reality is actually made up of 99.99999% space. The little part that's not space, or the little part we define as something, the material world, is actually just a little oscillation, a little electromagnetic boundary that we are bumping against, and we call that our reality. We call that a stone, an atom, we call that the water, the sand, or a star, a galaxy. And so maybe instead of looking at matter, defining the space, I start to think maybe it's space that defines matter.
It is fascinating to realize that if you remove the empty space in every atom of every human being on the planet and compress it all together, all of humanity would fit into the size of a sugar cube. Granted, it would have the density of a neutron star and weigh approximately 478 million tons, but this helps us to visualize the importance of understanding that every one of us are made of mostly empty space. But as it turns out, that space is not empty.
It was found that space-time at the quantum level is fluctuating with intense energy level, full of dynamic energy components.
We are not only talking about the space outside of our planet, we are talking about the space inside each and every atom of your body. Every single human on this planet has this in common. Regardless of race, color, or religion, we are all individual beings, yet this dynamic energy of the universe is constantly flowing through all of the space inside each one of our atoms, connecting us all. This helps us understand the profound quote of the Sufi poet Rumi, who said, "You are not a drop of water in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." You can literally feel the force of the universe inside you and flowing through you, connecting you to everything, because you are a part of everything through this dynamic energy. The great theoretical physicist John Archibald Wheeler, a colleague of Einstein, said, "No point is more central than this, that empty space is not empty. It is the seat of the most violent physics." The theoretical physicist David Bohm explained, "Space is not empty. The universe is not separate from this cosmic sea of energy." And Albert Einstein said, "Physical objects are not in space, but these objects are spatially extended as fields. In this way, the concept of empty space loses its meaning." This underlying background energy that exists everywhere in space is described in physics as the vacuum. What if there was a way to connect to this vacuum energy rather than depleting our natural resources? Humanity is on a course that's unsustainable.
For millions of years, magnetic fields have been around us without us knowing about them, until Faraday figured out that by moving a little magnet across a set of wires, we could get an electric power source that could power all of the devices we use today in our society. Now we are discovering there is another invisible field at the source of the material world, that is all around us and in large quantities. And by learning how to tap into its structure, we could power our world for generations to come.
Scientists from around the world are looking for a solution to tap the vacuum energy that is all around us. And it is important that they succeed. Current wars and potential conflicts of the future will be fought over resources like oil and water. Abundant energy will help create stability in the world and reduce the threats of the perceived energy supply disruptions that cause countries to go to war. War has been a big part of humanity's past. But does it need to be a big part of humanity's future? War has brought untold sorrow and suffering to mankind, and it is perhaps the strongest example of what can happen when we become so disconnected. Gandhi said, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." With our modern capacity to wage war, there can be no victors. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, once said, "The strength of a civilization is not measured by its ability to fight wars, but rather by its ability to prevent them." Learning how to harness this vacuum energy all around us could have profound implications, but it will require a paradigm shift. Some of the greatest advances in science have come from people with the courage to pursue ideas that challenge the accepted wisdom of the time. It was common for these new ideas to meet with rejection at first. Galileo was imprisoned. People resisted Faraday because he had limited formal education. And do you know what happened when Einstein published his great works in 1905? Nothing happened. People didn't connect to his ideas. The only person who really saw what Einstein had done was Max Planck, who would become the father of quantum theory.
Pursuing an independent path outside the academic world has been extremely difficult. It has been painful in many circumstances. The feeling of continuously being rejected, of not being understood, the constant interaction of fighting preconceived ideas has been a long road. However, it has forced me to be more accurate, to continue digging deeper, and to be extremely careful about my calculations and how I bring them into the world. So it has served a certain purpose.
Our material world is not as solid as it appears at the quantum level. As Tesla put forth nearly a century ago, we need to think of the universe as energy, frequency, and vibration, not as solid physical forms.
We're not dealing with little billiard balls. We're dealing with waveforms, oscillations in the vacuum. Just like when we throw rocks into a pond and the rings come out, the rings can intersect and it doesn't destroy the waveform of one of the rings or the other. The two just intersect. And so that the spheres, the little vibrations of the vacuum are intersecting, and it is the holographic structure of space-time itself. It is the interference pattern that encodes the information of the whole universe in every point.
The idea of a holographic universe was first put forward by physicist David Bohm, advanced by Gerard 't Hooft, then later expanded by Leonard Susskind. It was inspired by new understandings of black hole thermodynamics, that the information of the black hole is present on the 2D surface of the black hole, known as its event horizon. A simple example is that if you throw a wallet into a black hole, as the wallet is being consumed by the black hole, all the information contained in the wallet would become present on the surface of the black hole, because it is a rule of the universe that matter cannot be created or destroyed. Holograms are created using lasers to capture and encode the information of an object in the form of an interference pattern. The light reflected from the object is combined with that of a reference beam to create an interference pattern which can be retained on a photosensitive surface, creating a complete image that can be viewed in its entirety from all angles. The information of the whole is present at every point. When the hologram is cut in half, the complete image is present on both pieces. When it is cut again and again, every piece still contains the representation of the whole image. It is not the actual object, but a representation of the actual object in every piece. Nassim Haramein believes that the representation of the universe is encoded by the interference pattern of the fluctuation of space-time on the surface of every proton. The difference from the static hologram example is that the holographic information encoding is dynamically happening at every microsecond at every moment, and it is constantly flowing throughout the universe.
We often hear the sentence or the concept, everything is connected, it's all one. We hear that from even masters in ancient civilization or modern thinkers, philosophers, spiritual people. And it's a great concept. For many people, it resonates as something true. But how is that true? Some of the work I've been doing starts to open the door to understanding the dynamics and the mechanics on how everything is connected, so that it's no longer just a dogma or an idea, but it's actually based on the physics of reality. When I look carefully at the natural world, I found high level of coherency, high level of geometry, and as well this interconnectivity, this interdependency of all things with other things. The whole system functions together in a balanced way. And I started to wonder, what is the source of this self-organizing system?
What do you see? It depends on how you look. You could scan around an object and study it. Then you could look more closely using a microscope to isolate each part. In this instance, you would see millions of fibers and could spend a long time studying them. When you look too closely, you only see part of the picture. It is when you pull back that you see the part each fiber plays and how it is related to the others, and then the bigger pattern emerges. Imagine the new understandings we will gain if we could all learn to think differently and to look at our world through a big picture, connected perspective. Einstein believed that geometry was a key in the search to understanding the unity of the universe because it represents the relationship between things. great thinkers came to discover the underlying geometry of nature, such as the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence, in many different forms of life. When Nassim Haramein analyzed these geometric relationships in a changing three-dimensional space over time, he saw the 1 to 1.618 ratio appearing, known as the golden ratio, or phi ratio, as a fundamental part of the structure of space-time. Leonardo da Vinci encoded this in his famous work, The Vitruvian Man, showing that the phi ratio exists in different proportions throughout our bodies, and it's not just in humans. It is in animals, in plants, and in art. Geometric symmetry even affects our perception of beauty.
Spending time in nature teaches us that everything is interconnected and everything is interdependent on each other. We have a tendency to isolate systems and then analyze them as if they were not in relationship with anything else in the universe. So that many of our laws of physics starts with the statement within an isolated system. But then if you look up isolated system in a physics dictionary, you find that no such thing has ever been found. That is, nothing can be isolated completely from everything else in the universe. Gravitational fields cannot be isolated, electromagnetic fields, and so on. So we need to write science that takes account of the relationship of all things with each other. I think if we want to find the fundamental principles of creation, we have to experience nature from an experiential base. And then the mathematics should come together simply and show beautiful results. It's too easy for scientists to get into the laboratory and just keep trying to work out the theory and lose contact with the natural world. When I'm out there surfing, I'm actually constantly being connected to these fundamental patterns of nature. The particles going up and down in the wave, the energy wave pushing me through the ocean, getting inside a barrel, the big vortex, and the dynamics of the vortex. There is something very profound about that. Many of these things inspire me when I go back in the laboratory and start writing formulas. It's like it's in my cellular memory then.
For many of us in cities, nature is but a faint memory. We are overrun by our technology. We give such importance to our digital reality that we sometimes ignore our physical reality at great peril. And it takes up so much bandwidth, affecting our performance and our well-being. We've let the noise of technology drown out our inner voice, which Nassim believes is the source of inspiration. We need to occasionally disconnect in order to reconnect.
Some of the most beautiful times of my life were times where I was extremely isolated. So at that time, I was coming up to Whistler, Canada. More and more the interest I had in nature and physics and understanding the basis of reality was kind of taking over my interest. So I moved into a van to continue my research. I knew that if I could tough it out, minimize my expenses, I could get enough resources so that I could continue to work full-time doing research, trying to find some clues as to how I could unify the forces of physics. And I was in this amazing research zone where information was just flowing through, and I was researching, I was finding more and more information, and the pieces of the puzzles were coming together, and moments after moments of illumination. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, one after the other, and it was just so beautiful. It was the most transformative experiences of my life, and most of the physics I rode here. Of course, it took me some 25 years to flush out the math for it, but I knew I was onto something very early on. I was learning advanced physics, and I was coming to very specific conclusions, and then I was decoding ancient texts and ancient traditions that were completely confirming what I was coming up with in advanced physics, and how the world comes to be, and how the material structure exists. And many of these civilizations where these ancient symbols were present had numerous, thousands of different, very strange anomalies. Some of the things that are found around the world are not even reproducible with all the technology we have today. I felt that in these symbols, in these secret geometry, that these pointed to very fundamental understanding of the structure of space, of how matter is created, and how gravitational field can be controlled. It was my intent that the theoretical studies I was making would eventually lead to advanced technologies that would allow us to control gravitational field and electromagnetic field in such a way that it could transform our civilization.
Many in the Western world misunderstood the teachings of the Mayan culture and thought December 21st, 2012 was going to be the end of the world. However, the Mayan elders have said directly December 21st, 2012 wasn't the end of the world. It was just the end of the old cycle. Now we have the chance for a new beginning, a new era of connection, new understanding, and interestingly, on that day, December 21st, the end of the Mayan calendar, Nassim Haramein sent his paper to the Library of Congress, which for the first time ever connected quantum and cosmological physics.
And the result of my equation was the exact gravitational mass of the black hole. That is, if I solve Einstein's field equation to figure out the mass of a black hole, I would get the exact same result. So all of a sudden, I knew from the beginning of this exploration that I found something profound. If space is what's connecting everything, if space is what everything emerged from and returned to, then space is the great organizer. Space is the thing that connects all things, that gathers the information of all knowledge of every point in space. If we look at all the little fluctuations of the vacuum, the amount of energy inside a proton, in the vacuum fluctuation, the mass of the vacuum inside a little teeny proton in the center of an atom is equivalent to all the other protons' mass in the universe. That is, all the rest of the matter in the universe is represented holographically by the vacuum fluctuation inside one little proton, so that one little proton is connected to all other protons in the universe.
Nassim's calculations seem to present evidence that our universe is holographic in nature. Another big question in our effort to understand the nature of things: is the universe random? Think of the amazing biodiversity of our planet, of all the living things. We live in a wondrous world. Think of the complexity of a chimpanzee. Consider a jellyfish, or a blade of grass, or something less complex, something not alive, a simple Rubik's Cube. 3 rows, 3 columns, 3 deep, with 6 colors. What is the mathematical probability of solving that by random chance? 13.8 billion years is the current estimate of the age of the universe. If you could send a blind person back in time with a scrambled Rubik's Cube, and they could make one move every second, how long do you think it would take them to solve it? In the 13.8 billion years of the existence of our universe, you would have less than a 1% chance of solving it. So how much longer would it take to ensure that you would solve it? There are 43 quintillion possible states for the Rubik's Cube. To move through every possible state without ever repeating the same one, it would take 1.4 trillion years. And you would have possibly solved it at some point. But it could have taken billions and billions of years longer than the existence of our universe to solve a simple Rubik's Cube by random chance. Now imagine the incredible complexity of a human being with 100 trillion cells that are communicating every millisecond to ensure all systems are go. Imagine all the moving parts, all the possibilities. How long would it take to organize that? Because we are so vastly more complex than a Rubik's Cube. Yet humanity exists. So how can this be possible? What if we could tell the blind person something?
If we give just one little piece of information, yes, you're going towards the solution, or no, you're going away from the solution, then within a few minutes, the Rubik's Cube would be ordered. So from billions and billions of years to a few minutes with one simple feedback of information, that gives us a clue about the probabilities of how the biodiversity and the structure of cellular systems and all of our complexity that occur could have come to be with one simple feedback in the structure of space itself.
Our universe cannot be purely random. There must be a feedback mechanism in the flow of the universe. Further evidence that this must be happening can be seen in fractal mathematics. For thousands of years, traditional mathematics mostly described man-made objects and motion. It could describe a pyramid or a column, but for living objects like a flower or a tree, you need fractal mathematics. Fractal mathematics are the underlying patterns that build the natural world. The great mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot created computer programs that use fractal mathematics to render complex forms. When Hollywood wants to create a whole new world in a science fiction film, a new planet, new plants, and new life forms, they use animation based on fractal mathematics to create a complexity of the natural world. To describe nature using math, you also need a feedback loop called iterations. If you start with a simple form, then iterate the formula, which means the formula feeds back on itself. You can see the complexity grow with each iteration. It is fascinating and beautiful to watch. When you make tiny adjustments to the formula or to the base form, you can create vastly different results. The possibilities seem virtually limitless. Witnessing this incredible variety and complexity helps to understand the vital role that the feedback mechanism plays in our universe.
What is consciousness? What is the experience of being self-aware? In order for such thing to occur, there must be a feedback of information. For instance, you looking at yourself in the mirror knowing it's you. What if consciousness is actually a function of how space feedbacks on itself, which would be a dynamic that could generate self-awareness? Us feeding information to the structure of space-time and space-time feeding information back in terms of our experience every day. This feedback mechanism could be the source of the self-organizing system that we see all around us at the biological level and eventually becoming self-aware or conscious. This being the very extension of space-time looking back at itself and learning about itself.
Starting out in the world, when we first gain consciousness, we learn to take in information from all around us, from parents, from books, and now from technology. We are living in a time of information overload, and we are being bombarded by messages from everywhere. We have almost infinite choices of what messages we consume. It matters a great deal what you focus on. We know the universe has a feedback loop, and our brains have a feedback loop as well. Our thoughts are not only imprinted on the universe, they also deeply affect how we experience the world. The gift of being conscious is the ability to feel the wonderful moments of life. And it also means that we feel the painful moments. As you get older, you realize that good times don't last forever, and neither do the bad times. Because our brains have a remarkable ability to adapt. We can learn to shift our focus, to change our experience by changing what we put into our feedback loop. Gratitude and positive thoughts can build on each other, creating an upward spiral by connecting to your friends and to nature. You have the power of the universe inside of you, and you can overcome anything in life. Remember the age-old words, this too shall pass. As an individual, you put your thoughts and intentions out into the universe. And through the feedback mechanism of the universe, the collective energy of everything flows back into you. You are in a constant cosmic dance with the universe. The great poet Rumi said, "Stop being so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion." As individuals, we are powerful, but we have even greater power when we dance together, when we collectively focus our energy, when we share and focus the flow. The flow of energy is real and we can feel it. Some people have learned to connect in their inner journey through yoga and through meditation. Some people's only experience of this is cheering at a major sporting event with tens of thousands of other fans, cheering for a common goal, which is enjoyable, but it is capable of being so much more. Humanity is able to accomplish amazing things if we come together on a global scale to create positive change and elevate our collective evolution. You matter in the universe. You are part of the cosmic flow.
I think that every person is an incredible miracle, and every person is critical to our evolution.
Your body is an incredible example of interconnection and synergy. All the systems working together without even a conscious thought, in concert with your brain. Your brain may be one of the most amazing things we know about in the universe. It's doing billions of operations per second and doing everything it can to keep you alive. If you take a moment to connect to your body and appreciate all the invisible processes it does for you, it heals your cuts, helps fight disease, gives you energy. What if you stop being judgmental about the appearance of your body and choose to love your body for the incredible miracle that it is? How do you think your life would change? Your body is the vessel by which you experience the world and the universe, and it allows you to be part of the cosmic flow.
If people understood the miracle that they are, they would never be down on themselves. They would never feel like they are, less of. They would realize that they're part of an incredible will work of nature that they have access to, and that they have power in this universe. They can do things, they can transform things, they can transform themselves, and as a result, transform the universe.
Famous mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot proved that the smaller the unit of measurement that you use, the more accurate your final result. This is important to the work of Nassim Haramein because he uses the Planck units, the smallest unit of measurement available in the universe, in his calculations, which leads to an unprecedented level of accuracy. So, how incredibly small is the Planck unit?
In order to give you a conceptual notion of the relationship in size between the Planck and the proton size, if the Planck was a little grain of sand, then the proton would be the size of the distance between the Earth and Alpha Centaurus, an enormous bubble that spans large amount of space, some 4 light years across.
And then fill it with grains of sand. That's how many Planck units are in the proton. Imagine every grain of sand on the Earth would just be the tiniest speck of the number of Planck units on a proton. Not only does this show how small the Planck unit is, but it also shows how many Planck units fit in a proton. Haramein calculated that all the little Planck pixels add up to all the information of all the other protons in the universe, and that the fluctuation of the Planck oscillators creates the information network that the universe uses to get constant feedback. Einstein was fascinated with light and how it worked. his famous thought experiments would lead to several counterintuitive ideas that would forever change our world. One of those ideas was his theory of relativity. Einstein's general theory of relativity explains gravity as a consequence of the curvature of space-time created by the presence of mass and energy, and that space-time could be calculated through geometry. It literally acts like a fabric that stretches and bends. When you put lighter objects near a heavier one, they spin in the gravity well created by the large object. Einstein saw the fabric of space-time and gravity as continuous. Haramain sees the fabric quantized with a sea of almost infinitely small Planck pixels. So it behaves like Einstein's fabric on a cosmological scale, but the big breakthrough is that because it is made of tiny quantized Planck pixels, it allows for the forces of spin and gravity to be accounted for by Haramain's geometry at the quantum level. If you think of the water in a perfectly still kitchen sink, it could look like a single sheet of water. But if you pull the drain, the water spins around the drain while the rest of the surface is perfectly flat. This is how Haramain's work gets results like Einstein's single sheet. Yet because the water is really tiny individual drops, it allows for spin to be present at the quantum level. The other difference is that we can't think of it as a single sheet. Think instead of it being stacked infinitely high and infinitely low, infinitely right and infinitely left, in a giant Planck pixel soup that fills the universe, allowing spin to occur anywhere.
Einstein geometrized space-time at the cosmological level, and until he died, he believed that there were gonna be a solution to do the same at the quantum level. So I was very much inspired by that.
As Einstein was fascinated by light, Haramain is relentlessly fascinated by the forces of spin.
Everything in the universe has spin. And I came to conclude eventually that the fundamental torque that produces the spin comes directly out of changes in density in the structure of space itself. Just like a little change in density between hot air and cold air produces a hurricane, which if you look carefully looks a lot like a galaxy. The same forces are generated in the structure of space itself because of a gradient or a change in the density of the energy of space. The structure of spin is critical to our understanding of the dynamics of the universe.
Think about all the ways we are spinning. The Earth spins at about 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. The Earth spins around the Sun at about 67,000 miles per hour. The Sun, with our solar system, is spinning around the galaxy at 515,000 miles per hour. The galaxy is moving through the universe at approximately 1.3 million miles per hour. Our DNA expresses spin. Atoms spin. Protons spin. Everything in the universe spins. Spin may be the one thing that connects us all. We are living in a universe where everything inside of it spins. Seeing the interconnection of all spinning things made Haramain look at gravity in a different way. Gravity is one of the most mysterious forces in the cosmos, which is why so few quantum models include gravity. This is part of the reason for the disconnect between the quantum world and the cosmological world. Haramain asked the question, where is the best place in the universe to observe the most intense interaction of the forces of spin and the force of gravity? The answer? The edge of a black hole. Haramain has studied the possible connection between the forces of spin and the forces of gravity being intertwined at a quantum level.
the spin dynamics of the structure of space-time itself is what produces what we call the black hole. And this new equation proves that. It proves that it's the Planck fluctuations that produces the effect. The black hole is actually the result of the little Planck's vacuum oscillations dynamically, collectively organizing.
From this new perspective, we start to see galaxies in a new way. Haramain's theory predicts that there may be a supermassive black hole at the center of every galaxy.
It would be almost like spinning a coffee in the morning, where the coffee is completely black, a very dark black coffee, and you can't actually see the spin very well. But as soon as you put the cream in the coffee, all of a sudden the spin appears. Like the stars and the dust and the electromagnetic radiation in a galaxy makes the spin that's already present in the vacuum apparent to us. And we go, oh, look, there's a galaxy with a black hole in the middle, where the black hole and the structure, the spinning galaxy, are actually present prior to us being able to see it. Universal black holes, these huge giants in the middle of galaxies and quasars and so on, are actually the same dynamics inside a teeny object we call an atom. And that when we're looking at a proton or the nucleus of an atom, we're looking at the same structure, the same dynamics of black hole, but in a very teeny object.
Leonard Susskind, the director of the Stanford Institute for Theoretical Physics, who is best known for having won the black hole war with Stephen Hawking on the information paradox, stated in a mini-lecture series that there is no sharp separation between particles and black holes. Many physicists, including Leonard Susskind, are independently exploring new understandings of black holes. Haramain's proposed connection between the black hole forces and protons could prove highly significant.
We're made out of these objects. We're made out of protons and atoms and molecules and all this, and so it would stand to reason that the same kind of dynamics should be found even at the biological level. And that is what creation is. It actually emerges from the vacuum through the black hole structure into our reality.
New studies have shown that the spin rate near the surface of black holes seems to be very high. They spin close to the speed of light. His theories from 20 years ago predicted that result.
These are all components that tells us that the black holes are not the result of the material world, but maybe that the material world is the result of the dynamics of black holes.
Information and energy flow throughout the universe. For many people, the science of the interconnection of the protons is exciting because it resonates with the feeling of the connection of life. We feel the connection of life very deeply with our loved ones, our families, our pets, with the animals, with the amazing flow of nature and our connection to the natural world. Since our earliest beginnings, humanity has depended on the sun and the stars for food and navigation. The drive to understand the forces of nature at work in our world has pushed humanity ever forward. For millennia, humans have looked at birds and dreamed of flying. but for most of human history, flight was considered impossible. What is the next great advance in flight?
The structure of space-time is all around us. Imagine if we can learn to influence these structures so that we can control them and make them work for us. Gravity is a result of these little fluctuations in the structure of the vacuum. And by controlling those, by influencing those, we could be able to levitate things. Some incredible possibilities open as soon as we understand these fundamental mechanics of gravity and learn to control them and influence them. There's over 50,000 flights a day. Imagine if all these flights didn't require fossil fuels. Imagine the positive environmental impact this would have on our society. However, in order for us to evolve to a society that's able to fly maybe through its solar system or even through its galaxy, our technology, our understanding of the forces of nature, such as gravity, have to go to a deeper level. The helicopters behind me produce massive amount of lift by creating these small pressure differential and generating vortices in the structure of the air. Now imagine what we could do if we could create the same type of depression or the same type of gradient change in the structure of the fluctuations of the vacuum itself. The space would curve and generate what Einstein described as gravity in space-time curvature. By doing so, we could control the gravitational field. Is it possible to create a gradient in the structure of the vacuum itself? We already do this with the Casimir effect, where we create a little gradient between the two plates that forces the plates to get pushed together.
And now we've succeeded in doing what's called the dynamical Casimir effect, where actually instead of using plates, we're using little semiconductor mirrors, and we're able to oscillate them really fast, and as a result we're able to like pop little photons right out of the vacuum. So we're actually already extracting little bit of energy directly out of the vacuum.
This opens incredible possibilities. Tapping into the network of the structure of space leads to space travel across very large distances and so on.
We have already sent probes past Pluto and out of our solar system, and Hubble has peered into the unimaginably vast reaches of space. And we have come to realize that we are connected to it all. Your connection with the universe began long before you were born. Did you know that the atoms and elements of your body were forged in the hearts of stars? Carbon, nitrogen, iron, and then when that star exploded, they were spread throughout the universe. The atoms in your foot may come from a different star than the atoms in your hand, and different from the ones in your heart. We are connected to the stars in a profound way, literally made of stardust. Individual examples of a living, connected universe. Our mountains have watched humanity rise. Yet, what have we risen to? Are we at our best? Are we capable of so much more? Imagine if we open our eyes to new ideas, the heights to which we could rise, and make that journey for ourselves and for all of humanity. because we are all one. It has been a long road to get to the place where we truly understand the concept, as above, so below, as within, so without. And that the forces of black holes are present in something as small as a proton. This changes the way we see the unity of our world. As the dreams of our future take flight, this becomes an equation for a more connected humanity. Einstein believed that a unified equation should be beautiful in its simplicity, containing no free parameters. This is Nassim Haramein's equation. It contains no free parameters, and it solves for mass and gravity, both at the cosmological and quantum scale, with simple geometry and algebra.
I took the radius, I calculated the surface, I calculated the volume, and then I divided by the little Planck spheres to figure out how many is inside and how many is outside. So that the outside was denoted as eta in our paper and the inside as capital R. And then I just did R over eta. I just looked at the relationship of the inside information to the surface horizon information. And I got a ratio. And eventually, I multiplied that ratio by a mass, the Planck mass. And the result of my equation was the exact gravitational mass of the black hole, just by basically pixelating the inside and the outside of the black hole and looking at their relationship. So all of a sudden, I was getting a solution to gravity, the solution to Einstein field equation, a solution that is based on holography, but not only that, a solution that's based on little Planck pixel, so that it was quantized.
Einstein said we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Creating this bridge to unify the great divide in physics is an important step forward in advancing a more connected view of physics.
So in the paper that I wrote and I sent to the Library of Congress for copywriting in December 2012, I make this little prediction that the radius of the proton should be exactly this value. And I state in the paper that more precise measurement in the future may confirm this theoretical result. I started to work on getting the paper published and sending it to colleagues around the world. I was getting very good reviews on it from very advanced physicists. And then all of a sudden, a paper was published.
On January 25th, 2013, a new muonic measurement of the charge radius of the proton confirmed Haramein's predicted value. The experimental results were not what the quantum world wanted to hear.
The measurement came in at 4% smaller than what was expected by the standard model. And so it was very difficult for the scientific community to accept this measurement.
Nassim, you're on Yahoo Finance News. What do you think about that?
Oh my God.
PBS.news.
Changing the paradigm as we talk. History in the making.
New connected universe theory offers an alternative explanation of gravity and mass, revealing potential new source of energy. That's big. Look, it's in the middle of the day. I mean, the night.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh my God. It's incredible. The wire went out, and within minutes it was picked up by some of the largest networks and media on the planet, and it's already across the world. India, Germany, Europe is coming online. The East Coast will in the next few hours, I'm sure. I just feel like, okay, we're making a significant difference now. We're really kind of birthing a new paradigm, a new moment in the history of science and the history of understanding of the universe on the planet. Some 30 years I've been visualizing this moment where my work would appear on major news feeds all around the world.
I mean, we got a lot of pickup on this news release.
Today's the day. And it's kind of strange. It's a strange feeling. It's like, oh my God, it actually happened. And, you know, it seems like a day like any other day. But this is the day that it happened. And this could very well be the day that science changed forever.
But so far, it hasn't been the day that science changed forever. Looking back through history and physics, this is a pattern that has been repeated time after time after time. Someone comes up with an idea that later will become standard, but at the time, nothing happens. And sometimes there is massive criticism about the idea because it's a different way of thinking. We are only now discovering some of the unpublished works of Sir Isaac Newton. He didn't share all of his work because it went against the religious dogmas of his time. It's a little bit like steering a large ship. The wheel gets turned, but there's no immediate change of direction. In the world of physics, it can take years. After he first published his paper, Haramain was invited to share his knowledge with one of the largest laboratories in the world. However, when the administration found out about it, that invitation was cancelled because they were focused on looking for a solution in a different way. After 30 years of work, believing that this would be his moment, history is again being repeated, that potentially a big leap forward in our understanding is not being recognized.
What I'm most afraid of is that the world will misinterpret what I say, misinterpret who I am, and continue on their self-destructive path they are on today. And that this incredible opportunity in our civilization we've had to grow and to evolve to a galactic community will be missed. I hope to be able to inspire people to think differently, to not be afraid to be who they are, and not to take everything they've taught in the school or in the media or anywhere else just as a given, but actually to question what is being said and the validity of it, and to do it in a way that is constructive and that leads to higher understanding and higher levels of creativity. And I hope that my path and all this exploration I've done can inspire people.
Science doesn't always change overnight. The Greeks theorized about the existence of atoms 2,000 years before we could actually detect one. The cover of Scientific American states in huge bold letters, "The proton problem. Could scientists be seeing signs of a whole new realm of physics?" For physicists, the measurement of the charge radius of the proton is fundamentally important to the understanding of our universe. When the first measurement came out in 2010, it was significantly different than the standard scientific thinking of the day allowed. They said there must be a mistake, that there must have been an error. So when a new measurement was done using heavier muonic particles which would allow for even greater accuracy, the results were even more shocking.
And so immediately I purchased the paper confirming the correct radius for the proton and that no errors were found in the earlier experiments. And so I took that number, I plugged it into my equation, and it outputted something remarkable. I was so excited to find that now my prediction is within one standard deviation of their data. And so evidence is supporting that actually our theoretical result might be the exact radius of the proton, and experiments are slowly creeping towards it, confirming the theory very strongly.
Standard thinking says that there are 4 fundamental forces in the universe: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, and the weak force. But the strong force and the weak force were theorized before we understood about black holes.
From my study of black holes and scaling laws of black hole structures in the universe, I found that the proton, or the nucleus of an atom, could act as a mini black hole.
If you describe the little proton as a black hole, all of a sudden you calculate the gravitational force of 2 of these little black holes attracting each other, you get the exact force that we call the strong force that holds the nuclei together. Exactly. Not like approximately, but exactly. The strong force, that force that we actually invented out of nowhere because we didn't know how the protons held together, because they're positively charged, right? They're supposed to repel. So when we discovered that, we invented a force to force them to be together. And we said gravity is too weak to do the job. So we invented a new force. And since then, we can't get gravity and the strong force to like be nice to each other. And that's because we invented one of them. Since then, we've ran like supercomputers night and day, billions of dollars of investment in supercomputing power to try to find an analytical solution to the strong force, to LQCD. Zero solution has been found to this day. So maybe it's wrong, bro. Try that.
Because these little protons are spinning very rapidly, when we move them away from each other, this very strong attractive force drops off very rapidly, which is what we call the Yukawa potential.
Out of the geometry emerge an exact solution to the force necessary to keep the protons together. And out of that came out the spin of the protons. And from the spin, I'd extrapolated the range of the gravitational force of protons to one another. If they were mini black holes, that force would be completely eliminated. We wouldn't need the strong force because we would realize that it's actually the gravitational force acting at the quantum level. So I am able now to account for the strong force with a gravitational force and eliminate some of the largest complexities in quantum theory and reduce the number of fundamental forces in the universe. What really keeps me going, this amazing transformation I can see when a person realizes that they're connected to everything and that they matter in the universe. We live an imprint as we go in our daily life. in the structure of space-time itself that were informing the structure of the vacuum, and so that nothing would be the same if we weren't there. We're actually participating in this incredible complex will works of nature, and that the communication of all the things in it is occurring through this imprint that we leave on the structure of space-time as we go along, as we interpret what we see and how we feel. And so we have a responsibility in our interpretation and our feelings and our behaviors in what we are feeding the universe.
So what do you want your imprint to be? You have the power in every moment of every day to choose how you feel and to choose how you show up in the world. Your choices matter in your own life and the lives you affect all around you. We can look at the world through the eyes of a child again, be filled with wonder, imagine, create, explore, and question. Our heart is how we feel all the things we can't see. And when we integrate the power of imagination with the love and strength of our heart, our world will change, bringing hope for a better future. And this requires action. We already know about the feedback loop of the universe that creates reality. But there is also a powerful global technological feedback loop in the form of the internet. We consume content, but we also contribute content. Status updates, pictures, tweets, blogs, and we like, we react, we comment, and we share. This is a perfect example of a feedback loop. We live in an age where we can help each other solve problems like never before. One person has a problem, solves it, posts it, and we can all benefit from it with a few clicks on the web. Scientists from around the world can collaborate remotely and give each other feedback like never before. We are living in the most technologically connected time in history. So what are we going to do with this opportunity? Technology is a double-edged sword, and it can cut both ways. Many people think technology alone holds the key to creating a better future for humanity. But there is more to it than that. It is the consciousness with which we create and wield that technology that will significantly impact our world. And the choice is ours. We can choose to do more than just use technology to understand the mechanics of the heart. We can choose to listen to our heart, to connect to it, to be inspired by it, to learn to follow it, and to learn to use it to the fullest. Our heart is part of our grand connection to the universe. Together, we have the power to raise consciousness globally. We can make kindness go viral. We can actively contribute to creating a world where we focus on the good. We can renew hope, create solutions, and we can share old wisdom and new ideas. It would be hard to explain to someone 40 years ago the incredible impact of the simple connectivity of the internet and how it changed nearly every aspect of our lives. It is hard for a young person today to imagine how the world used to be, because everything is changing so fast. Can you imagine what the future will be like in 20 years? Where will science take us? What will our technology look like? What will we learn when we stand inside a virtual reality proton and observe and interact with 3D visualizations of real-time experimental data?
It's really exciting to see the interest that this new theoretical understanding is bringing. We're collaborating with industry and have now state-of-the-art laboratories to produce technological advancements that are critical for the evolution of our planetary system and our society, including energy production, gravitational control, and all these things. So a lot of incredible things are happening, and we're making great strides in achieving a whole new level of understanding of our universe, ourself in it, and a whole new level of technology to go along with it.
It is estimated that human knowledge took 1,500 years to double for the first time. Then by 1900, it doubled every 100 years. By the 1940s, it doubled every 25 years. And in 2013, it is estimated that it doubled every 13 months. And that time span continues to get shorter. But knowledge alone isn't wisdom. Leonardo da Vinci said, "Learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else." From this place of connected understanding, he became very prolific across multiple disciplines, making innovations in science, in anatomy, in biology, in engineering, and in art. Da Vinci and the other great masters have shown us that we no longer need to go through life with blinders on and look at things as separate. We can all learn to expand our vision and see the beauty of the connections that are all around us. And we can build bridges connecting our different disciplines and integrate our knowledge from a higher perspective.
Those very important moments where you read something or you look at it, a theory that's being propagated by the establishment. You have a choice to accept it as a truth and completely ignore what may be going on inside of you that may be saying something different. Or you might reflect on what you've learned, take what you think may be correct, and maybe see how you could add your view to it to transform it.
For the last 30 years, Nassim Haramein has been willing to ask questions and explore new ideas, and this journey has yielded ever further advances. Now, his work with Dr. Amir Aval Baker has led to being able to extend his holographic mass solution to accurately predict the mass of the electron, the hydrogen Bohr atom, and all the elements of the periodic table that make up our physical reality with an unprecedented level of accuracy, 1 order of magnitude more precise than the standard approach is able to predict. All of these innovations are yet another step closer in helping us to usher in a new era of unified physics. We live in a time of great possibilities. We're all in this world together, and we are stronger together than we are apart. We have the opportunity to unify, to imagine the change we want to see in the world, to advance our collective evolution and advance our approach to science. We can imagine the world from a connected perspective to see ways to create new ideas in science, health, business, and in living more connected lives. Many people around the world are experiencing a feeling and a knowingness that something incredible is happening, that there is a great shift in consciousness taking place, and that people are awakening to the idea that the disconnected worldview can transition to a more connected way of being. This supports some of the most advanced philosophical and spiritual concepts that we find throughout the ages, from masters that have come and told us that everything is connected and we are all one. They told us that there is this background energy which is the force that creates stars, planets, and life. Science is showing us that there are infinite possibilities to explore in the vastness of the universe, and you have almost infinite possibilities to explore within yourself. We can create a new future for ourselves, and we can co-create together a positive future for humanity when we explore our connected universe.